Let's be honest, without the Industrial Revolution, you probably wouldn't be watching this video right now. The spinning jenny, the steam engine, the power loom. These inventions didn't just change how people worked, they reshaped the entire world. Factories replaced family workshops, and steel giants rose where small craft shops once stood. It was the dawn of machines and the dusk of human hands. But like every so-called great leap forward, progress came with blood on its hands. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about replacing handcraft with machines, it replaced morality with money and people with production lines. It killed the artisan spirit and gave birth to an age where suffering was measured in profit margins. Was it really worth it? All that misery, just to give birth to the modern comfort we take for granted, like the phone you're holding right now. Today we talk about workplace safety and labor rights, as if they've always existed. But back then, stepping into a factory meant gambling your life every single day. Workers lost limbs, eyes, or lives, and no one blinked. If a man died in the morning, his replacement was hired by nightfall. Factories didn't stop, machines didn't care, and the owners, well, they cared only about one thing: keeping the gears turning. Even outside the factories, death followed progress wherever it went. Building the Panama Canal claimed 2 of every 5 workers, the Transcontinental Railroad 2 out of 25, the Erie Canal 1 in 50. In this new modern world, survival wasn't a guarantee, it was a privilege. Boilers exploded like ticking bombs. Without safety valves or shutoffs, one minor mistake could level an entire factory. By the late 19th century, at least one boiler exploded every 4 days, killing tens of thousands annually. Safety cost money and human life was cheap. Factories ran on coal, steel, and the bodies of the poor. Resources were everywhere: coal, iron, timber, and so were people desperate enough to die for them. In early industrial England, life was cheap, and death was business as usual. When thousands crammed into filthy cities filled with open sewers and disease, the risk of a boiler explosion hardly seemed terrifying anymore. Industrialists treated workers like replaceable parts. If one broke, you simply fitted another. They didn't even flinch before sending men and sometimes children deep into coal mines carrying open flames. Imagine that for a second. Dark, suffocating tunnels with barely enough space to crawl through. The air so thick with methane that one spark could turn the entire mine into an underground inferno. Electric lamps didn't exist yet, so miners worked by candlelight, lighting their way with their own death sentence. And it did happen again and again. On May 25, 1812, in the Felling Colliery mine on England's northeast coast, a spark met trapped gas. The explosion tore through the tunnels like a hurricane of fire. 92 miners died, including boys as young as 8. It took a month before rescuers could even enter the mine to recover what was left of their bodies. That tragedy would later inspire the invention of the safety lamp, a small mercy born out of unbearable loss. But mercy was rare in the age of industry. The government didn't mourn. The newspapers didn't weep. To most, these people were statistics, just another headline buried between ads for soap and sewing machines. This apathy gave factory owners a free pass to keep their empires running however they pleased. There were no safety standards, no rules, no moral compass, just profit. When death happened, the blame often fell on the workers themselves. In one case, the Boston Herald blamed a factory worker named Michael Markham for his own death, claiming he overestimated his abilities. No one questioned the unsafe machinery. No one asked why human lives were worth less than the gears they operated. While machines took over the world's workshops, millions of people were forced to chase a dream that no longer existed. The so-called American dream may not have been named yet, but its promise already echoed through the 1800s. Move to the city, work hard, and life will reward you. For most, that dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Families abandoned their villages, packing what little they had, and set out for the growing industrial cities. But the reality waiting for them wasn't prosperity. It was overcrowded slums, polluted air, and jobs that paid less than it cost to survive. By the time a farmer heard about a factory job and moved his family into town, the position was already gone. The city didn't care about broken promises. It only cared about filling factories. Soon, every street was crammed with desperate faces. Men, women, and children competing for the same handful of miserable jobs. And because there were always more workers than work, employers could pay as little as they wanted. Factories became human machines, fast, cheap, and soulless. The craftsmen who once took pride in their art were now just gears in a system built for endless repetition. No more handmade quality, no personal touch, just production, profit, and exhaustion. Inside the factories, conditions were as dark as the coal that fueled them. Workers spent 14 hours a day breathing toxic air, standing beside dangerous machines that didn't stop ever. A missed step could mean losing a finger, a hand, or your life. And if you thought adults had it rough, the children had it worse. Parents, struggling with starvation-level wages, started sending their kids to work beside them. It wasn't out of cruelty, it was survival. Industrialization didn't just take jobs, it stole childhoods. For the poor, the choice was simple. Send your child to work or watch your family starve.
By the mid-1800s, children had become the cheapest form of labor, small enough to crawl under machines, obedient enough not to complain, and desperate enough to accept a few pennies a day. They worked in spinning mills, glass factories, coal mines, and textile plants. Any place that needed hands tiny enough to fit where adults couldn't. Imagine waking up before sunrise, walking through freezing fog, and stepping into a deafening room full of gears and smoke. That was daily life for thousands of children, some as young as 5, 12, sometimes 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And when accidents happened, and they always did, the machines didn't stop. There were no child labor laws, no safety rules, and no compassion. Children were expected to work until their bodies broke down. If they fell asleep, they were beaten awake. If they were injured, they were replaced. In textile mills, young boys known as scavengers were forced to crawl under running machines to clean out fallen cotton. One slip, one wrong move, and their limbs were caught in the spinning frames. The factory floor was soaked with oil and blood. Mines were even worse. Children worked in pitch darkness, hauling carts of coal too heavy for their size, breathing in dust that blackened their lungs. They weren't called workers. They were called trappers, couriers, and drawers job titles that belonged more to animals than to human beings. It's easy to judge the past, but for the families of that time, there was no real choice. Industrialization promised progress, but for the poor, progress meant suffering. Every child in the factory was another day their parents might not starve. That was the cruel math of the Industrial Revolution. Still, not everyone turned a blind eye. Writers, priests, and reformers began to speak out, describing what they saw as hell built by human hands. They documented the broken bodies, the lost childhoods, the lives consumed by smoke and steel. Their words would eventually light the first sparks of change. By the late 19th century, the world had started to look in the mirror and didn't like what it saw. The so-called Age of Progress had been built on the backs of its most vulnerable. Children who should have been learning, laughing, and dreaming were instead coughing up coal dust and losing their sight to factory smoke. But then came people who refused to stay silent. Social reformers, teachers, and photographers began to expose what others wanted to ignore. Among them was Lewis Hine, a former school teacher turned photographer. He risked his life sneaking into factories, mills, and mines, pretending to be an inspector just to capture a single image, one that could wake the world up. His photographs were raw, haunting, and undeniable. Tiny boys covered in soot pushing carts of coal, little girls barely tall enough to reach the spinning wheels of the looms, children who looked old before their time faces, hollowed out by exhaustion, yet still clinging to something faintly human. Those images hit harder than any speech or report ever could. They forced America to confront the truth. Its industrial greatness was built on broken childhoods. And slowly, the tide began to turn. In 1916, the first child labor laws were passed weak at first, but it was a start. Factories fought back, calling them un-American. But by the 1930s, the fight was over childhood had finally been returned to the children. Of course, not everywhere. Even today, across parts of the world, millions of kids still work in dangerous, exhausting jobs. Different machines, same story. The Industrial Revolution gave us modern life, electricity, cities, medicine, everything we rely on today. But it also gave us a warning. Progress without humanity isn't progress at all. Behind every invention, there's a price. And sometimes, that price is paid by the smallest hands.